focusing on building a ethical machine, because I don't think, no matter how much enhancement a human has, we can't compete with an artificial general intelligence. My interest was never to create something that was permanent. It was always to create a therapy device that you use to improve your condition. And once you've used it, you take it off and go on with the rest of your day.
You're listening to Widdershins podcast, where we take the ultimate sci-fi themes found in books and movies and discuss them with the world's leading scientists, engineers, and experts. This week's podcast is brought to you by our sponsors and preferred retailers, Wordery and the Book Depository. My name is Amy Rose, and in this episode I have a conversation with Casey Pfluger. Now, Casey and I are the founders of Cortex Brainwave Technologies, and we're developing a brain-computer interface headset for the treatment of autism and ADHD. Now, I don't usually talk about the projects outside of hosting Widdershins podcast, but there are a few things I'm involved in, and this particular project is something really close to my heart because my focus is on ethical and human-centered technologies for the betterment of mankind. And I believe that this is one of the most important things that I'm going to do in my lifetime. So in this episode, I have quite a candid conversation with Casey. After all, we do talk daily. So I took the opportunity to ask him questions I haven't thought to ask him before. This episode is a bit of an insight into what we're working on at the moment. So let's have a listen to my conversation with my friend, colleague, and co-founder, Casey Pfluger from Cortex Brainwave Technologies. Casey Pfluger, welcome to Widdershins podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Casey, my listeners don't have a great deal of knowledge about what we're doing with Cortex Brainwave Technologies and the brain-computer headset that we're developing at the moment. So part of this season is about artificial intelligence and technology and how it's going to impact on our future. So this particular episode, we're going to be talking about brain-computer interfaces, and you are an absolute genius when it comes to these things. So I'm going to be picking your brain, and although I know some of the answers to them, I've never actually had a conversation where I have all of these questions answered to the full extent, so where you can actually express without any limitations. So here we go.
Well, I'm happy to answer the best of my capacity. And if there's any extra questions that we have that neither of us can answer, we can always find out afterwards. I mean, always I find when you and I talk, sometimes we have an insight that we didn't have before. So, yeah, it's always cool.
Yeah, it's been really fun bouncing off each other, actually, because you are an expert in this particular technology and I'm relatively new to it. In fact, when I say relatively new, when I first met you was so green. I literally had no idea what or how a brain-computer interface can help people with autism and ADHD. I only ever had Elon Musk's Neuralink in my head, which was disturbing. So that's where I think it's going to be fun to talk about the amazing ways in which brain-computer interfaces are going to impact on society. So I'm pretty excited to talk to you about that.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it's very valid to be talking about that, especially with the recent release of the live stream from Elon Musk, which I found personally quite disturbing, to be honest, because there are so many ethical concerns around an implanted brain-computer interface. Because it's not like a cochlear implant where it's replacing your lack of ability to hear things. This is something that could actually change your brain activity, and that does raise a lot of ethical concerns. So they're going to have to be very careful about the way they write their software.
I think so too. And with Neuralink, they're not afraid of being a little bit Black Mirror. And in his live stream, which was on Friday, Elon Musk literally mentioned how they are a little bit like Black Mirror, and it's going to be a bit Black Mirror-ish.
Another question from Twitter. Will you be able to save and replay memories in the future?
Yes, I think in the future you will be able to save and replay memories. I mean, this is obviously sounding increasingly like a Black Mirror episode, but well, I guess they're pretty good at predicting. But yeah, essentially, if you have a whole brain interface, everything that's encoded in memory, you could upload. You could basically store your memories as a backup and restore the memories. And ultimately, you could potentially download them into a new body or into a robot body. The future is going to be weird.
He actually said that Black Mirror is predicting the future really accurately, or kind of something similar to that. I found that extremely worrying because, to be honest, when I watch a Black Mirror episode, sometimes it just it really messes me up for quite a while afterwards. I've got to pace myself through something like that. You know, I can't watch more than a few at a time, or I start kind of getting really kind of worried about the future.
Yeah, same. And I think that's why we need to encourage those who are working on the technology for good rather than the profit-based technology. So they're doing it just for the money or for the likes or for the notoriety, however you say it. So some of the things that he did say was, in the future, you're going to be able to save and replay memories. Ultimately, you can download these memories into a new body or robot body, and that's where it was a bit Black Mirror-ish.
Yeah. Or the idea of having multiple Neuralink devices implanted all over your head, and able to change deep inside the brain as well as the surface locations, activity, as well as continuously recording. I mean, that there's so many issues around that.
Yeah, there are, and I think that's why he said it though, because he wanted this to be
controversial.
He did.
It works because look, we're talking about it now.
Yeah, and but it's also the reason. It is, but it's also the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I think we need to talk about how brain-computer interfaces really are going to be over the next few years, because even though Elon Musk is working on something that I think is inevitable, I think that, and you might disagree with me here, but his technology, I don't think he's going to back off with putting wires in brains anytime soon. He's not going to... No. He's not going to pull back and say, I don't want to stream music to people's brains. I think he's going to go at this full throttle just like his initial reason,
and the reasons he stated went before, like right at the start of Neuralink, when he was first bringing up the idea and building teams around it, was because he wants humans to be able to compete against artificial intelligence when it emerges. Like general artificial intelligence, the kind of thing that could wipe us out as a species, potentially, if it's built the wrong way. And that is quite concerning. I mean, if he's trying to make us upgrade that way, I mean, wouldn't he be better on focusing on building a ethical machine? Because I don't think, no matter how much enhancement a human has, we can't compete with an artificial general intelligence, because they can bootstrap themselves over and over in a matter of a tiny amount of time. We can't do that as people.
No, that's right. But what else can we do? we can stay as we are. And I'm definitely not a supporter of becoming half robot, half human, although people in our circles, Casey, are. But I do think maybe his intentions.
There's so many
are
amazing
good.
applications.
Yeah.
But anyone who's read a bit of science fiction or watched Star Trek and seen things like the Borg, where people are really subsumed by the technology that's inside them, it's a valid concern for people to have.
Yeah. So Elon Musk might be working on something that could save us. But in the meantime, it might pave the way for some pretty ethically
stuff.
So, Casey, what are you working on at the moment?
Okay, at the moment, what we're building are the core and most important part are sensors that can measure the blood volume and the way that the blood moves around in your brain. And this is important because it's exactly the same the way that an MRI works. So when you have a functional MRI, it measures where the blood is in your brain, and that matches, and we know that it matches from doing experiments where we have a electrical measurement as well as a blood flow measurement in an MRI, and that actually directly correlates with brain activity. So when you have brain activity happening inside your brain, immediately the blood moves from where there's low activity, or it shunts the blood to the part of the brain that's having the most activity, which makes sense. I mean, because if you're concentrating on something, then the blood is going to go to the part of the brain where it needs to be to keep the nerves happy and to keep them humming along. So we're building the sensors to measure that so that we can work out what's happening inside the brain as far as an overall pattern, and then from there use that pattern to do a therapy called neurofeedback, which is using what's happening inside the brain to give you a direct feedback onto a device. So you can work out. So from there, you can actually start to learn, okay, when I'm concentrating, this is what it looks like on the game, or when I'm concentrating, this is what it feels like. I can actually feed that back. And this kind of therapy has been going for a long time. I mean, the first time I heard about it, I just thought it couldn't possibly be true, because the first research in this was in epilepsy, and it was in patients that didn't respond to any medication or any other therapy, and they were being taught what a seizure felt like, or they were being taught how to understand when they were approaching a seizure based on how mentally they felt. And when I saw that they were having an 80% reduction in seizures just from this kind of training, so I thought, as a scientist, because I was a research scientist at the time, and I thought, no, surely not. This can't be true. And that's where this all started for me.
Well, this
was about skepticism.
Well, this was about 10 years ago, and I can understand, because even just 2 years ago when I was learning a little bit, because this is when Elon was doing his thing, and I was learning a little bit about what a brain-computer interface was, even then people were saying, what are you doing? You're insane. No one's ever going to take that up. So for you to keep going for years and years, doing your research and building this is pretty profound. I mean, that's dedication. But why did you keep going? What's the underlying reason to it all?
Well, initially the reason was just out of pure curiosity, and because I'm diagnosed with ADHD and autism myself, And I knew pretty soon after I first started looking at this therapy that it was also being explored in ADHD, particularly to improve concentration for people with ADHD. And I thought, well, damn, this is going to be so much better than the medication, because the results were saying, oh, well, when you've been doing this therapy, you can have the benefits all the time. You don't have it's not like, say, for medication, you take the medication, you've got to wait till it's working. And then it wears off, and you've got to take it again. And the irony of ADHD is that sometimes you can't concentrate enough to take the medication that helps you concentrate.
Right.
So I find that particularly ironic. Yeah.
Okay, so this brain-computer interface that Cortex is developing, how is it different? So we've got invasive, which I think is Elon Musk's, and then you've got the non-invasive. But why are you developing a non-invasive? Is it because it's easier to develop? It's more ethically sound, or why? What's the technology behind it, and why is it maybe better?
Well, basically because if you have an implanted system, the whole family can't use it, for one.
Mm-hmm.
Two, there's not as many ethical issues around having something that doesn't get implanted. And three, well, there's lots of other points, but another one is that you can't, if you want to not stop using it, you just take it off your head.
Yeah.
And also, if it's going to be implanted, there's so many regulatory concerns and everything like that. And my interest was never to create something that was permanent. It was always to create a therapy device that you use to improve your condition. And once you've used it, you take it off and go on with the rest of your day. Or you use it whenever you want and don't use it whenever you want. So it's much more attractive as far as I'm concerned, because there's no way that I'd be having something implanted unless I was I wouldn't want to have anything to do with the Elon Musk device until it's at least maybe to the 20 million implants. And even then, I'd want to give it another 10 years after that, just because it's such a big change. We'll see what happens with it, but it's such a big deal. And also the brain is a really, like he said in his live stream, and what I know from my time in neuroscience, is that the brain is a really aggressive and protective environment. So if you put anything into the brain immediately starts to coat it with protein and cover it in proteins and try and break it down with acids. Inside our body is actually quite a difficult environment for putting things into. And that's one reason why heart valves and things like that, artificial heart valves, they're quite they need to be replaced, because the body coats them and covers them in proteins and they build up things. I mean, because they're not alive, they can't clean themselves. They can't repair themselves all the time like our actual living parts do. So any implanted device is also going to have those issues.
Yeah, I heard him talking about how that's one of the biggest setbacks. So the technology itself is a cinch according to them, but what they are having trouble with is the actual
biocompatibility. I think
so the brain's eating
and that is really a major issue for any implant. It's I mean, the good thing about things like the cochlea is because it's in a part of the body that's really quite isolated. So if you're putting it into that part of the ear, it doesn't really have much. It's not a liquid environment so much. It's an open environment. It doesn't have all of the toxic liquids that not toxic to us, but toxic to anything non-biological. So it's an ideal thing to start as an implant thing. And I mean, I think it's amazing to see the kids at school, because my daughter goes to a deaf designated school. She's not deaf, but there's so many kids with cochlears at her school. I'd say that every third kid has a cochlea.
Wow.
And it's so cool to see them kids that would previously have only been able to sign, but now they're able to speak and hear. And it's like we get messages on the school Facebook group of, such and such has lost their cochlear external part, because they have an external battery, and I think it's a battery, and a antenna that goes to that communicates with the implanted device.
Right.
So it's like a microphone that talks to the implanted device. They're not connected physically, but they talk to each other. But yeah, I think it's awesome, and yeah.
Well, I know that some of the cochlears, I think ethically they're fantastic. What some of the other invasive brain-computer interfaces are aiming to achieve, though, is to use cochlear implants to communicate directly with the brain. And that's one of the things I think, and to stream music directly to the brain, and really just to interact or interface directly with the brain. So cochlea is awesome.
I mean, the cochlea is a replacement. So what it does is put in the parts that are damaged, and not everyone not every deaf person is able to use them, because they need to actually have the intact nerves.
Yeah.
Or the electronic device to activate. So if they don't, they're unable to have that. So in the case of the Neuralink system, people who aren't able to have a cochlear implant because they don't have an active auditory nerve, if their auditory nerve is dead, they wouldn't usually be able to have a cochlear, as far as I understand. With the Neuralink system, what you could do would be to put those wires into the auditory center of the brain.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that person would be able to hear. And see, I don't have an issue with that. No. I don't have an issue with improving function or giving the person a sense that they should have. My concern is when it's a conversation about, we're going to improve the way their brain works by continually electrically stimulating the brain. I mean, we take medications that do that. With antidepressants are able to improve the function in people where their serotonin and dopamine levels are too low for them to be able to function in normal life. I get that completely. There's a lot of issues around how to regulate a system that has such power.
Yeah, and one of the concerns is, so the more that you have embedded in the brain, the easier it is for someone to come and switch it off. Someone to hack it, or someone to, let's just say you don't pay your bill for your hearing service or whatever it might be, whatever the case might be. Let's just say Spotify in the future has a service that goes through the Neuralink. And I know this sounds really sci-fi, but I can imagine that you can pay for streaming services direct to the brain in the future, including music. So imagine if one of those services was Spotify, and you were using their system to hear things, or, to access certain things that you rely on in your life. And if you, for some reason, I don't know, maybe there might be a warrant for your arrest, and so everything gets shut off. So you don't have your hearing, you don't have your vision, So there's a lot of.
An even more concerning one that goes towards more a Black Mirror style would be for an autocratic government to decide what you are able to hear.
Oh, yeah.
Where they filter out what content you can have based on what they deem as appropriate. And that is extremely, extremely worrying. Or they can adjust the way that your attitude is towards certain topics. so they can make you really like a certain topic and not like another one. And that's absolutely not what we're looking to do. We're measuring and giving you direct feedback on what's happening. Our system doesn't stimulate. It only gives you the same type of feedback you get for an arm or a leg or from your hearing. We don't actually have any stimulating part of our system. So that's the major difference between us and Neuralink. They're talking about measuring and stimulating at the same time. We're talking about just measuring and giving you a visual or auditory or touch feedback on how your brain's functioning, so you can learn it just like you'd learn how to move your hand or to walk along. And that kind of ties into the way the brain likes to learn. So it's a learning process to use our device versus we're going to stimulate this part of your brain whether you like it or not. And I find that particularly worrying.
Yeah, see, when it's just a headset that you can pop on your head, that is, look, I think every second person would be keen to use that, because it's not just for, I mean, it's obviously we're designing this particular headset for people who are living with ADHD and autism.
Yeah, and also with brain injuries, and it also seems to be showing some really good promise in depression and anxiety for people to learn how to regulate those conditions. But that research has still got a lot of stuff to go, but it's looking very promising at this stage.
Yeah, but also as when it comes to gaming and virtual reality, but also even if you don't have a neurological condition, and let's just say, I'm going to put this out there, that you wanted to use this headset because you want to strengthen your brain in some way. Let's just say you want to enhance your memory capacity. Could you use it to do that? Would you be able to visually, via neurofeedback, by putting on this headset, be able to see how your brain is functioning when it comes to memory, and then play a video game or something to enhance your memory capacity?
Absolutely.
How would that work?
There's actually been some research studies on people with no cognitive issues, so no underlying issues like me, where for example, going in and doing the cooking in the kitchen is a bit like trying to do a Rubik's Cube with my hand tied behind my back. Not being able to see the colours because I've got to try and coordinate the timing of when I have food cooking and which thing I need to do next. And before I started my ADHD medication, I would literally kind of be in the kitchen rotating around in circles, not knowing which thing to do next. I mean, this therapy helps with that kind of thing. That's called executive function. But what the research is showing is that because people are curious, they want to know, does neurofeedback improve people without any underlying problem? And they found that it does. It provides significant improvements in function if you have no underlying issues. So you can actually optimize your brain function, which is pretty cool. I mean, our drive is initially to help people who have issues that make their daily life really difficult. But if we can help other people who want to improve their brain function, that's even better.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit excited about that too. Just being able, like, maybe when it comes to memory capacity, or learning another language, or learning to play an instrument, and being able to put the headset on, and although it's not our primary focus, it could be used to...
Wow, imagine being able to see what it looks like when a violinist is playing their violin and seeing how their brain fires. I mean, I can't wait to try that because I'll have to get my bow fixed and set it up and see what it looks like when I'm accessing memories of songs, and whether it can measure that a certain part of my brain starts to get more blood flow into it. I mean, that'd be so cool. Imagine that.
It feels like art to me. I can imagine recording the interactions.
It's kind of cool that you mentioned playing an instrument, because that actually relates directly to one of the origins of neurofeedback, which was researchers were trying to work out why learning to play an instrument improved the function of people with cognitive issues so much. Why was it that learning an instrument seemed to be almost protective and reducing their symptoms so significantly? And that kind of led into, well, actually, by doing that playing that instrument, they're actually doing a form of neurofeedback, because you're listening to what's happening. You're having to coordinate your hand or your mouth to make that certain shape, and that is triggering the patterns inside your brain that lead to new nerve function. But learning an instrument's hard. It's really, really hard. And this, I don't want what we know from the research is that doing neurofeedback where you play a game is much easier than spending hours a day playing an instrument.
Mm. And that brings me to my next question. How is it going to change lives over the next 20 years? I mean, what do you think a brain-computer interface will look like in a couple of decades, given that technology is exponential? And not Black Mirror, but how it's going to benefit.
Personally, I keep going back to the Spielberg movie, Ready Player One, where they have a suit that you can wear that measures where your body is, and you have an interface that measures what's happening inside your brain, and lets you being inside an immersive VR augmented reality style situation. I mean, I think we're heading towards something like that, where you can interact with people all around the world via that kind of interface. And I mean, if we have things that are more severe than COVID come along, we might well be isolated like that. I hope not, because even for me as someone with autism, it's been kind of hard not to be able to meet with people easily, or actually having to think so hard before I shake someone's hand or anything like that.
So what are the other benefits? I mean, there are a few different industries that it's going to impact. I mean, the gaming industry, which is going to be $1 trillion industry, add brain-computer interfacing and playing games just with your brain, not even using your hands. Can you see any other applications where in a couple of decades it's just going to, you can't even imagine, or, from your insight?
Well, I think that as far as the sensors we're building, they're going to be able to be used not only for the brain but also for other parts of the body. So for things like bionic limbs, or say the exoskeletons that are becoming more and more prevalent for people doing heavy manual tasks. So they're building like a frame that you wear, and at the moment it measures the muscles in your arm, but it's not it's a slower process because it's measuring muscle activity versus actually if it was measuring the intended brain activity, it's a lot more smooth. So things like personal robotics and things like that could be a big application. Just trying to think, what else could it do? I'll have to think about that.
I was just, something that just came to me was, the nanobots, sort of from afar, the nanobots go in and you program them to go into the human body and I guess do mini micro surgeries that surgeons can't do. I can imagine that you might be able to go and look inside your own body with your own brain.
Personal nanobots.
Yeah. To say, oh, I've got a bit of a headache. What's going on there? And just use your brain to, visually.
Internal doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's quite realistic to think about it that way. I mean, it depends on how the nanotech sector develops. Whether they go for purely, I think they're going to go for things that can be interactive and programmable, because that makes sense. At the moment, everything is passive. You have something with for example, they're building therapies to help with certain cancers, for example, where they target the cancer with a particular molecule, and then they attach that to a killing part, so it can be activated when they've got enough of those things around the cancer to kill it all. But they have to do it slowly, so they release they then inject the signal that causes that killing, but they only do it. They kind of put it into the vein, and they produce it slowly. So you slowly eat away at the cancer, and it doesn't release it all at once, because that can cause major issues with blood pressure and everything else if you break down a cancer all at once.
Wow.
So that's a passive system. So imagine what an active system could do.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it spots a cat, like if you're feeling a bit off and you go, oh, I've got a bit of a problem with my throat, send your little nanobot down there, have a look with your brain. Oh, looks like there's a cancer. I'll just activate these little bots and they'll just get rid of that before it even becomes a problem.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that, wow, that's what we were thinking that could be happening by now, back in the 1980s.
Well, I just think an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure, Like, let's have a look at what's going on before it becomes a problem.
The night before last, it was like, yeah, we should have had that hoverboard by now. Sure. Damn it.
Oh, yes, it's taken a while. I mean, we've got our flying cars and, just giant drones, basically, just jump on that. But the hoverboards...
What I really want is a Mr. Fusion.
What's a Mr. Fusion?
It's like a little tiny fusion unit that provides whatever power you want. But you just have it on the bench, and you fill it with your kitchen scraps. Imagine that. Oh, I so wanted that as a kid.
So you put all your kitchen scraps in there and it powers your house.
Yeah, that was a Back to the Future imagination.
Oh, I mean, epic.
The potential of fusion stuff. I just really hope we really need it right now. At least, I mean, they're getting close.
They are. Well, I have recently heard that in Russia they have the first Tesla tower, and not the Elon Musk Tesla, but the original Tesla.
They built one.
I might send it to you, Casey. It's they're cool. Powering with this tower. They're powering a whole town, apparently.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, look, you might debunk me.
I'd like to know what the RF levels were, because if it's sending it through the ground like Tesla wanted to, no problem. If it's sending wireless signals, like wireless power through the air, I'd want to have a lot of testing around it, because wireless power, that is high power radiation.
Oh, it is.
Anything that's high power enough, I mean, that becomes a potential issue because it interacts with cells and causes damage. Like, what we're using for our device is near infrared, so it's the lowest power of light. So it's the kind of light you get out of a lamp, or say if you shine a torch through your hand, you're shining infrared radiation through your hand. The red that comes through is near infrared, versus the light from the sun, which is ultraviolet, which is high power. So it can actually knock atoms out of your skin, which that's the precursor that goes to skin cancer.
And on top of that, near infrared light is a therapy anyway. So
true. I mean, they're using high powered near infrared light to heal stroke damage in brains, which I found very reassuring, because the key for me is to make sure we're not doing any harm to start with.
Yeah.
Because the two worst things for me would be for this to not work as it's supposed to, and two, if it caused any injury to anyone, that would be absolutely not what we want. We want something that's very non-invasive and very gentle to people. It doesn't hurt them, but but does actually help.
Well, that's what I'm passionate about as well. So I've said to you before, Casey, that this to me, because I have a huge focus on ethical technologies and technologies for good, I feel like what we're doing here with Cortex is the most important thing I'm ever going to do in my life. The problems it's going to solve, the people's lives it's going to impact, it's going to be incredible. I think you and I, as we build the team, and I mean, we're doing the prototyping tomorrow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
We've won awards so far. I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, Neil's going to try do his best to find the thing that's going to destroy us. He said he's going to find our Achilles heel as a startup and tell us what is the worst possible thing a competitor could come up with to destroy us.
And that's what we need to know. We need to know these things. It's going to be exciting. Well, thank you so much, Casey, for having a chat with me today about brain-computer interfaces. It's always awesome to talk to you. I'm probably going to talk to you again today because that's how we roll. But have a lovely day, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode with Casey Pfluger. Until next time, please subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Stay safe, enjoy the company of your loved ones, and of course, enjoy the rabbit holes.